My name's Nigel Smith. It's very nice to be back at Nerd Nite again. So this is the title of my talk, One Cinema, 110 Years of History, though I've added a little addendum. I'm going to mention some other cinemas, it's not just going to be just about, not just be about one. So one of my many nerdy pursuits is I lead walking tours. And the thing I sort of specialise in is the history of cinemas and cinema going. This is me doing my talk about the tour about the West End in front of the Prince Charles Cinema.
It's very loud. On it.
Okay.
Right.
It's one of the benefits. Good skill though if you're a tour guide in central London. So yeah, I do these tours about history of cinema. So I do one in the West End, this is that one. I also do one in Islington. We start here at Angel Station, just outside Angel Station, where that NatWest Bank used to be, well, was this building, the ABC Empire. Closed in the 70s, got turned into a car park, demolished, then it turned into a bank. And we finished the tour at this cinema, another building that is no longer a cinema, the Carlton. It's now a church, and that closed as well. But there is one cinema in Islington that we cover on the tour that is still open and thriving, and it is this one, the Screen on the Green. I just want to also shout out to Simon Pollock, who, if you don't follow him on Instagram, has got this amazing account called London Suburbia, and he kindly let me use this picture. This is the interior of the Screen on the Green. Anybody been there? Familiar with it? A few of you? Yeah, so it has been part of the Everyman chain of cinemas since 2008. It has got these sort of sofas at the back. They'll bring you a cocktail. They'll deliver you food. So it's pretty swanky. And I think kind of like the swankiness of it makes you forget how old it is. It actually dates from, well, it celebrated its 110th birthday last year. Screen on the Green was opened in 1913. Not the oldest cinema that's still in operation in London, there's a few more. The Electric in Notting Hill, 1910. Ritzy in Brixton opened in 1911. The Phoenix in East Finchley opened in 1912. I had a bit of work done on it in the 1930s, as you can see. But Screen on Green, very old, continually operational as a cinema for 110 years. So what I want to do with this talk is kind of tell you the history of this cinema, but hopefully by doing that, tell you the sort of history of cinemas in London more generally. So cinema, film, Victorian art form. Back in 1896, the Lumiere brothers, French early pioneers of cinema, their early films were shown in London at the Royal Polytechnic Institution, now the Regent Street Cinema. If you've not been, lovely venue to go and see a movie. That's 1896. The following year, this guy, Randall Williams, self-proclaimed king of the showman, is demonstrating his animated photographs, they call it, but same stuff. He was showing some of the Lumiere brothers films, and he was showing them small print, but he was showing them the Agricultural Hall in Islington. If any of you know Upper Street, that's now the Business Design Centre. People also showing their films in fairgrounds. Randall Williams and others like him, these showmen, would take their films all around the country and just display them, show them at fairs before kind of purpose-built cinemas became a thing. Other places in Islington, just around the corner from the Screen on the Green, Collins Music Hall. Films were shown as part of a variety show bill. This building, now the Waterstones in Islington, if any of you know it. One of the early British pioneers of film, a guy called Robert Paul, he showed films here. Scintillating titles, this is what you could have seen. The Twins Tea Party from 1896. Here they are. Perhaps even more exciting, Tommy Atkins in the Park, 1898. Here he is. All of these available on BFI Player, should you be interested. Other places where people would watch moving pictures is they'd use these things called a mutoscope. Probably the same films, but they're on a kind of a revolving kind of disc of cards. Put in a coin, crank a handle. And these were often, you'd find these often in shops, quite often sweet shops, confectioners, places that obviously would attract children. And this is really where kind of like the birth of the screen on the green comes from, because a couple of Italian brothers called the Pesaresi brothers, they had a shop on Upper Street in Islington, and they had some of these machines, and they also just started showing films on a little projector, a whitewashed wall, and they called it the Empress Electric Theatre. It became a very successful but very tiny cinema. Fast forward a couple of years to 1913. So I do a lot of research into the history of cinemas. This periodical is absolute godsend. Big fan of the Kinematograph and Lantern Weekly. Scintillating read. This is issue from July 1913. This little news line in it. So this is July 1913, saying the Empress Electric Theatre, this is the cinema they had in their shop, close to Islington Green, has been razed to the ground to make way for a much more pretentious edifice. And just to give you a little flavour of what else is going on in the world of cinema in 1913, literally the next sentence in the Kinematograph and Lantern Weekly after this. A turkey trot contest is to vary the picture programmes at the Star Palace Bermondsey on Saturday night. So full array of entertainment. A few months later, October 1913, in the theatre's opening section. Well, I'll read you the entry. So Monday afternoon witnessed the formal inauguration of the Empress Picture Theatre, Upper Street. Contrasting this beautiful edifice with the original Islington show, which occupied part of the same site until a couple of months ago, all present gave vent to expressions of astonishment. The evolution of a tuppenny resort into one of such recherche character speaks volumes for the great hold obtained by pictures over the classes and the masses in merry Islington. And it goes on to describe what the building was like, talks about its noble facade, green glazed tiles, steps of marble, entrance hall has a mosaic pavement, and a capital orchestra suitably embellishes the pictures, which are of a high-grade quality and eminently up-to-date. So it's still very much in the silent era, showing these short films accompanied by music. So this is 1913 that this opens, and it basically their original shop was here. They went into business with their neighbours, knocked down the block, and built this. And it looks pretty much, the facade looks today exactly as it would have looked like when the Pesaresi brothers opened it in 1913. And there was loads and loads of competition for them when they opened. So also over the next few years. So just down the road, about 100 yards, this cinema opened, the Electric Theatre. This opened in 1909. If any of you know Upper Street, it's now Cafe Nero. Just along from Angel Station, the Angel Picture Theatre opened in 1911. There's a theme, it's now Starbucks. Also along, this is now demolished, a cinema called the Blue Hall Cinema. This opened in 1918. Further along, this is a Shell petrol station now on Upper Street, opened in 1928. The Lido. Another building that's been demolished on Essex Road, the Coronet, opened in 1911. And then this is a cinema that I showed you at the beginning that's still intact, but no longer a cinema, opened in 1930. And this is the building that I showed you at the beginning, where the NatWest Bank now is. Sorry, I'm going back. So this is all of these cinemas, apart from the one that's now the Cafe Nero. These were all open to the public in 1940. 1940 was the first year that cinema ticket sales in this country went over 1 billion. By 1946, that's the peak year in the UK and the US, but in the UK, 1.6 billion tickets sold. So just to sort of give you a bit of context, last year in the UK, kind of climbing up back after the pandemic, 130 million tickets. So we're going from a stage of cinema at its peak where people are going to the cinema kind of week in, week out multiple times, where on average people are going maybe once or twice a year. By the 1950s, the screen on the green is been bought by a family, Bloom family, and it's now part of a small chain called Bloom Theatres, and they renamed the cinema the Rex. These are some adverts of what they were showing in the 1950s at the Rex Islington. So yeah, the Bloom Theatres. Bloom Theatres was founded in 1926 by a guy called Harry Bloom, and it's a very similar story to that of the Pace-Racy brothers. He had some shops in South London, would show films, and then as kind of actually having cinemas a thing takes off, he converts those into proper cinemas. This is his cinema in Wandsworth, the Bloom's Super Show, and his son Alex would run a lot of these cinemas. And he was very much a showman, kind of in the sort of the inheritors of the Randall Williams, King of the Showman. Had a Tarzan film that he'd show, had a caged lion outside to publicise it. Showing a war film, actually set up explosions in the cinema. The curtains caught on fire one time. So, yeah, slightly hazardous. And then this is what the Rex looks like in 1961. So here it is, screen on the green. Looks familiar if you know the building. But cinema admissions in the country start to decline by the 1950s, and by the 1960s we're down to about 400 million tickets sold. So still much more than today, but far fewer than there were at its peak. And if you know the phrase feapit to describe a pretty scummy cinema, that's a pretty fair description of what the Rex was like in the 1960s. One of the benefits of it being a bit shabby and cheap was actually a lot of the local Greek and Turkish community would use the cinema after hours, once the cinema had closed, and would show their own films that they would sort of like bring in, so unsubtitled, shown to local, shown to local Greeks and Turkish on separate nights. Alex Bloom dies in 1968, and his daughter takes over the cinema. This is her Romaine Hart. She'd worked for her dad since she was a teenager, was booking films, but in 1969 she became the manager of the Rex and had a kind of a very sort of decidedly kind of different approach to running it than her dad. So she closed it down. She spent £12,500 refurbishing it, renamed it the Screen on the Green, and just started having a kind of a very different kind of approach. So in her own words, what I set out to do was bridge the gap between commercial and art houses, to have a place for intelligent people to see what I thought they would enjoy in great surroundings and excellent sound and projection. And to me, that sounds quite a lot like if you've gone to a Curzon or an Everyman or a picture house today, kind of what they're trying to do now. So the origins of kind of a lot of that, what we sort of think of as a boutique cinema, a lot of it has that origins with what Romaine Hart was doing when she relaunched the Screen on the Green. First film she showed was a Robert Redford film called Downhill Racer, but she was showing things like a lot of American indie movies, Martin Scorsese, Robert Altman, that sort of thing, showing all-night Marx Brothers marathons, classics of world cinema. So this is at a time when mainstream cinema was on the decline. So all of the cinemas that I showed you earlier had all closed. By 1972, every single one of those cinemas has closed down. This is the one that is now the Starbucks, which was an Odeon at the time. But the demographics of Islington were changing a lot, and there was a new audience for this sort of programming that Romain Hart was trying to do. And this is an article in The Guardian, and what they described, what she was trying to do was she was looking for 18 to 25-year-olds, well-educated, lively minds, to fill her 300 burnt orange seats. So pretty much similar to what you're trying to do here at Nerd Nite, Louise. So while all of these other cinemas are closing down, the Screen on the Green was getting this reputation as being this really, really cool venue, not just for film, but also for music. And typified by this night, August 29th, 1976, there's a gig at the Screen on the Green, the midnight specials. For £1, you could see the Sex Pistols, the Clash, and the Buzzcocks, all on one bill. This poster is designed by Jamie Reed, who did the design for the Nevermind the Bollocks album. Other musicians who were making use of the Screen on the Green at this time, Adam and the Ants, slightly younger audience who might not know who Adam the Ants are, but huge band, especially in the 80s. And they had a big hit in 1980 called Ant Music, and the B-side of that single is a song called Fall In, which has immortalised the Screen on the Green in song.
876 5 4 3 2 1 at the Screen on the Green. Fall out, fall out.
Not the most lyrically challenging song. But this is a time where sort of, youth culture, music and film are very much sort of like inexorably kind of entwined. So yeah, this is the Screen on the Green sort of like at its peak. Romain Hart has got a reputation for, identifying audiences, knows the sort of films that people are going to see. So she also sets up a distribution company called Mainline Films that distribute loads and loads of very, very cool movies. They distribute David Lynch's first film, Eraserhead. This is Spinal Tap is one of their films. Quite a lot of cool British movies like My Beautiful Laundrette is a Mainline film. They also start expanding. Open some new cinemas. The Screen on Baker Street, there's one in Belsize Park called The Screen on the Hill, and open a few cinemas outside of London as well. And from what I understand, quite a cool, fun place to work. Somebody who worked at the Screen on the Green as a teenager was a film producer, Stephen Woolley. He went on to make films like The Crying Game. If any of you saw the Bill Nighy film Living the other year, he produced that. His job, he was an usher. One of his jobs was to make sure the fridges were stocked with Kiora orange drink, and that the ones that were most going to go out of date first were at the front of the fridge. Somebody else who worked at the Screen on the Green was our very own Nick Perry, who is working the AV tonight. Oh, save your applause, because oral information, what could that be, I hear you ask? Well, let's find out.
The Screen on the Green Islington recorded information line. Currently showing at the Screen on the Green, up to and including Thursday the 19th of April. Bridget Jones' Diary, Certificate 15. Hugh Grant, Renée Zellweger and Colin Firth star in a romantic comedy from the makers of Notting Hill.
Beautiful. I love the way he says Zellweger. I've got to know Nick quite well over the last few years since I've been talking at Nerd Nite, and so this talk was all planned. And he said, "Oh, I used to work here." So Nick, just if you got, I don't know if you might, but just tell us, like, did you phone it in every week? How did you produce the?
First of all, I should say I speak like this whenever I talk to people normally. Originally, I happened to do it on the Screen on Baker Street, where my mate that managed it, and he couldn't be asked doing it, so I did it on an old recorded, a tape machine for answering the phone. Wasn't very complicated. Tony Bloom, Romain's nephew, heard it, got me to do all the other screens. The rest, as they say, is history. But I just did it remotely from home, remote working, back in 2001.
You're ahead of your time, Nick. But that's also, it's very nostalgic because, like, I sort of forget that before the internet and before booking stuff, I phoned up cinemas to find out what was on. You know, look through Time Out magazine to see film times, look at the local paper. So this is the early 2000s. A little bit further ahead, in Quentin Tarantino goes to the screen on the green, just pops in to see a screening of Kill Bill, christens the screen on the green the coolest cinema in London. So it's got that reputation as well. 2000s. Competition, the cinema sort of landscape starts to change. At the other end of Upper Street, The View, big multiplex, opens in 2002, very, very mainstream, but still, over 20 years old now. And just a couple of years ago, the screen on the green had competition at the other side of the building. When this opened, this is the Odeon Dine and Lux, where you get a very comfortable reclining seat and a full meal is delivered to you. But I think what's kind of interesting about this in kind of like this context that we're talking about is these multiplex chains kind of are now looking at the boutique cinemas that I think Romain Hart was instrumental in launching for what they're trying to offer people now. So kind of things are kind of going a little bit full circle. Screen on the green, still thriving. Still open. I don't know if you can see with the lights, but it had a bit of a Barbie pink facelift during the Barbenheimer. But a really, really great cinema. If you've not been, would suggest you go. Very much sort of keeping kind of film culture alive, still showing stuff on 35mm film. I have kind of launched a sort of little bit of a campaign to try and recognise Romain Hart with a plaque on the cinema. A friend of mine has mocked up what it might look like, and hopefully, having heard this, you agree that she deserves one. Thank you. And if you want to learn more about the history of cinemas, come on a walk with me, because you'll have as much fun as these people.
Questions?
You mentioned that some of some of the chains have existed for quite a long time. I think Odeon you mentioned was already there in the 70s.
Yep.
What are the oldest cinemas that still exist?
The oldest cinema chain in this country is Odeon. So the first Odeon cinemas opened in 1930. And yeah, so that's to be honest, that's the only one that still exists as a chain. Any others? Yep.
You mentioned that buildings had all sorts of weird uses through the years when we weren't cinemas.
Yeah.
Are there any standouts from across the country where you're like, what the hell happened there?
In a good way.
More about it.
So sort of cinema buildings that have had, you mean that have been reused?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. Well, I mean, the most common one that is not particularly weird is bingo halls. Bingo legalized in 1960, and that sort of coincides with this sort of decline of cinema going. So a lot of cinemas became bingo halls. I do a tour about the history of cinemas in Acton in West London, and there's an amazing 1930s Art Deco building there, cinema, which has been repurposed as a climbing wall, which is really great. The problem with cinemas, these old cinemas, is they're enormous. They were all 1,500, 2,000-seater buildings, single screen. So actually converting them to anything useful is really, really hard. So climbing wall, there's a cinema in Tooting, which is just an ludicrous bingo hall. But I think climbing wall is probably one of the best ones that I've seen or am aware of. Yep.
It seems like cinema culture and filmmaking culture is really changed. It still is I think youth culture and films are still deeply interconnected. More people watch films than ever before, times about 10. It's just most of them are about 15 seconds long. But like, what do you think it'll look like in 2040, or like where are the trends going? What are cinemas going to be here? What do you think, Nigel?
Our cinema's going to be here in 40 years' time. I hope so.
20 years.
20 years. Sorry. Well, almost certainly. It's only 20 years. I think they'll still be here. I mean, who knows what filmmaking will be like, and whether people have got an attention span for a feature film. I think one of the interesting things actually about, I'm sort of saying how cool it is that the screen on the green is showing stuff on 35mm, and we get quite nostalgic and a bit fetishistic about film. But actually, one of the great benefits of digital is cinemas can be much smaller. There's a cinema that I'd go to in Acton, which was in a converted library, so kind of like the reverse. Old library's been turned into a cinema. That cinema couldn't exist if it wasn't for digital technology and a small, compact projector. So and they can show anything they like, pretty much, because all the movies are in the cloud anyway. So I think, and there is definitely a culture of people are still interested in old movies. So I think it will still exist, but in a very different way. I'm not sure I've answered that question very well. Yeah.
So one of the reasons that a billion tickets were sold is that people were going to watch the news.
Yes.
2024, possibly disinformation across all of these elections. Is there any interest in collective news watching?
Is there any interest in collective news watching? I have no idea. I think it would be I can't imagine. I'm not sure I would want to go and watch collective news watching. And also the collective news watching, they'd still be watching whatever partisan load of made up bollocks probably they would be choose to watch anyway. But it is interesting about that period of you'd go to see the main movie, you'd get a little bit of news, you'd get a cartoon, all of this other stuff is an interesting shift. Oh wow. Okay, here up front.
Is that your favourite shirt?
Yeah. I thought somebody when I put this on earlier, I was like, that's the same shirt that's in all of these slides. This is like I call this my tour guiding shirt, because if you're leading a big group, you can it's distinctive. So yeah, it actually is my favourite shirt. And what's annoying is where I bought it from, they've stopped making them, and I was going to get more. Yeah.
You mentioned that cinema viewership kind of declined even well before the internet, essentially.
Oh yeah.
What was the reason for that happening? Because internet I can understand, but
Yeah.
what caused the decline in cinema, like in that short span of time?
Well, a big thing was television. Oh, sorry. What caused the decline of cinema? Kind of basically from the 1950s onwards. So, television was a big reason. People, had entertainment in their homes. Another reason, in those, when the screen on the green opened, people were living, they're pretty poor housing in Islington actually, and people would go to the cinema a lot because it was a lot nicer experience than actually being in their homes. And if you look up the interior of any sort of 1930s Odeon, they look incredible. So there's this sort of sense of it being this sort of like affordable luxury for people. And as people's homes got better, just general sort of standard of living went up. That was less of a reason. Other entertainment options, big part of that. People had more disposable income, and there were also fewer films because the people who were making films were then making TV programs, and so on as well. Yeah, in the middle there.
Can you see the Picture Palace coming back, like the Odeon in Holloway Road? Or
Yeah. The question is, can you see the Picture Palace coming back? What's interesting about so the idea of Picture Palace, I guess, is like this enormous cinema, and there's a really beautiful cinema in Holloway Road that's probably got 8 or 9 screens, but all of any multiplex, any cinema you go to that's an old cinema that's got more than one screen, almost certainly started life with just one screen and over more than 2,000 seats in it. And what I think is interesting is going to these. So, for instance, Odeon Leicester Square is one of the few hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of seats, 800 seat, 900 seat cinema. It's still got a circle. I went to see the Taylor Swift concert movie there the day it came out, and it was amazing, literally packed, and it was a proper big communal experience. And I think one of the other interesting sort of trends that we're seeing of people thinking about other uses, this like communal cinema experience, but it might not necessarily be to see like a movie. So a lot of small independent cinemas do their busiest nights when they're showing National Theatre live, for instance, and especially having that as an option, out of London where there are fewer theatres or whatever. So I think that kind of communal viewing experience is something that people really, really like, and it is relatively affordable. Any more? Yeah.
Do you believe that if cinema tickets were to become affordable for everyone again, would people return to going to the cinema multiple times per week?
If cinema tickets were cheaper, would people go multiple times a week? I don't know if they would go multiple times a week, but cinema tickets are too expensive. And I would say evidence proves that if they are cheaper, people will go. Because one of the cheapest cinemas in London is the Prince Charles Cinema. The last 2 times I've been there, it's been absolutely rammed. Every year there is an event called National Cinema Day where cinema tickets are £1 or £2. That means you're inevitably in a sold-out audience. Whether people will go...
View is pretty cheap as well.
Hang on. I'll finish my point and I will do that advert for View. I don't think people will go back multiple times a week because there's just not the amount of content. So, your typical Odeon in the 1950s would change programs twice a week. And that's just not going to happen. View has got some very competitive pricing. Yep, right at the back.
What do you think of intermissions in films? Like, you've had 3-hour films coming out now.
Yeah, what do I think of intermissions in film? So I saw Killers of the Flower Moon at the IMAX. It was over 3 hours long, no intermission. But it's also got plenty of sort of like, I favour an aisle seat so you can nip out to the loo if you need it. I don't know about intermission. If you watch an old movie at home, they sometimes like Gone with the Wind, like the home version, has an intermission in it, and I quite like that. I've got nothing. I mean, actually, to keep cinemas going, it's a good thing because they get to sell more food and drink and stuff. So intermissions are a good thing. But I don't really. I went to university in Nottingham. We had this really little feapit cinema in Nottingham called the Savoy. This is in I guess the mid-90s. And whatever film you were they were showing, whether it was 90 minutes or 3 hours, halfway through it would just stop and somebody would come out and sell food. And I didn't like that. I didn't like it to be interrupted.
Last question, make it good.
Okay, here.
You've mentioned Odeon, Leicester Square,
Yep.
and somewhere in Tooting.
Yep.
As like internal experiences, which are the 2 best cinema or ex-cinema buildings in London?
So what are the best interiors? So I think the ones that the one that I would say I'd really recommend if you've never been that is still a cinema is the Curzon Mayfair, which is sadly under a little bit of threat, but it's like no other cinema. It's just sort of this kind of weird Art Deco, and it still feels like a big auditorium, even though they've turned the circle into a second screen. And actually, Odeon Leicester Square, the interior of the Odeon Leicester Square broadly, it's got more seats because they're more comfortable, is broadly the same as it was when it opened in 1937. So I think they're 2 really, really distinctive. If you want a unique cinema going experience, those are 2 that I would recommend. Thank you.